I never thought a simple drive home from a late shift would lead me to experience something so unsettling, something that still haunts me. It was one of those typical nights, working as a dispatcher for a logistics company, the kind where you're alone in a dimly lit office, surrounded by the hum of computers and the flickering of fluorescent lights. My shift ended at 2 a.m., and I was exhausted. All I wanted was to get home and crawl into bed, leaving behind the noise and chaos of the day. Little did I know that the chaos was just beginning. The drive home was familiar. I took the same route every night, a long stretch of rural highway that twisted and turned through dark woods and empty fields. It was a 2-lane road, flanked by tall trees on both sides, and during the day, it felt mundane. But at night, it transformed into something eerie, something that could make the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. As I pulled out of the company parking lot, I flipped on the radio, hoping to drown out the oppressive silence. The DJ was chatting about the latest happenings in town, his voice a comfort in the stillness. The road ahead was empty, illuminated only by my headlights, which cut through the darkness like a knife. I was tired, but the drive was routine, and I felt a sense of calm settle over me. About 15 minutes into my journey, I noticed the fog creeping in from the edges of the woods, slowly swallowing the road ahead. It wasn't unusual for this area, especially at night, but it always added an unsettling layer to the drive. I turned up the volume on the radio, hoping the music would keep me alert. As the fog thickened, my heart began to race. Suddenly, my headlights caught a glimpse of something moving along the side of the road. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There was a figure, a woman, standing just beyond the tree line, her silhouette barely visible in the fog. She looked disheveled, her clothes torn and dirty. I slowed down, my instinct kicking in to see if she needed help. "Hey, are you all right?" I called out, my voice barely carrying over the engine noise. She didn't respond, just stood there, her gaze fixed somewhere deep in the fog. I glanced around, half expecting to see a car nearby, but there was nothing. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I rolled down my window. "Do you need a ride?" I asked again, trying to sound calm, though my heart was pounding. The woman remained silent, unmoving. It was as if she were a ghost, an apparition in the night. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. The fog swirled around me, and I stepped out of the car, my breath coming out in visible puffs. "Hello?" I called again. The woman finally turned her head, her face obscured by the shadows. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" To my surprise, she took a few hesitant steps toward me, her eyes wide and filled with fear. I can't find my way home," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I was walking. I don't know where I am." A sense of unease washed over me. The road was remote, and I couldn't imagine why someone would be out here at this hour, lost and alone. "Where were you trying to go?" I asked, hoping to gauge her situation. She hesitated, glancing back toward the dark woods. I don't know. I just want to go home." I glanced back at my car, the glow of the dashboard lights casting an eerie glow in the fog. "Look, it's really late. Why don't you get in, and I'll drive you to the nearest town? They can help you from there." The woman nodded slowly, and I could see the fear in her eyes as she approached my car. I felt a wave of relief. Maybe this would turn out okay after all. I opened the passenger door for her, and she climbed in, her movements hesitant. As I drove away from the dark stretch of road, I tried to engage her in conversation, to ease the tension in the air. "What's your name?" I asked, stealing a glance at her. "Sarah," she replied quietly, staring out the window at the fog. "Thank you for stopping. I thought I was going to be out there forever." "No problem," I said, forcing a smile. "It's not safe out here at night." We continued driving in silence, and the atmosphere in the car felt heavy. I could sense that something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The fog seemed to envelop us, distorting everything around us. "Do you live nearby?" I ventured, trying to break the silence. She shook her head. "No, I was just out for a walk. I didn't realize how far I'd gone." I glanced at her again, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, something dark and haunting. But when I looked closer, it was gone, replaced by the look of a lost soul. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. As we drove deeper into the fog, I began to feel uneasy, as if we were being watched. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, trying to shake off the feeling. "Just focus on getting her to safety," I told myself. Suddenly, the radio crackled, and the DJ's voice faded in and out, creating an unsettling backdrop to our journey. I fiddled with the dial, but nothing came through clearly. The atmosphere in the car felt charged, electric with tension. "Are you okay?" I asked, breaking the silence again. "You seem a bit anxious." She looked over at me, her expression distant. "I don't like the dark," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's too quiet out here." I nodded, trying to comfort her. "We'll be out of the woods soon. Just hang in there." But as we drove further, the fog thickened even more, making it hard to see the road ahead. I squinted through the windshield, my heart racing with every passing moment. The world outside felt surreal, like we were trapped in some kind of nightmare. Just when I thought I couldn't take the tension anymore, I spotted a sign for a small town up ahead. Relief washed over me. "There we go, Sarah. We're almost there." As I pulled into the town, the lights of a gas station flickered in the distance, and I felt a sense of safety wash over me. But as I slowed down, I noticed something strange. The gas station was deserted, no cars in sight, and the lights flickered like they were struggling to stay on. I pulled up to the pumps and turned to Sarah. "Do you want to stay in the car while I go inside and call for help?" I asked. But she was staring out the window, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't like it here. Can we just keep driving?" Confused, I glanced around. "It's just a gas station. I can't leave you out in the fog like this." "No, please," she begged, her voice rising. "Just go." Her panic sent a chill through me, and I felt a wave of confusion wash over my thoughts. What was happening? Why was she so terrified? "All right, let's just keep going," I said, trying to sound reassuring. I shifted the car back into drive, and we pulled away from the gas station. But the fog hadn't lifted, and as we drove deeper into the town, I began to feel disoriented. The streets were empty, the buildings looming over us like dark shadows. It felt like we were in a ghost town, completely devoid of life. "Where is everyone?" I muttered, my heart racing. "This doesn't feel right." Sarah remained silent, her hands gripping the edge of her seat. I glanced at her, trying to gauge her reaction, but she was staring out the window again, her face pale. "I just want to go home," she whispered. I swallowed hard, anxiety knotting my stomach. "I'm trying to help you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Where do you live? Maybe I can take you there." But before she could answer, something caught my eye, a flicker of movement in the rearview mirror. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there, just the dark road stretching behind us. "Did you see that?" I asked, my heart racing. "See what?" Sarah replied, her voice shaky. "I thought I saw something. I don't know. It felt like someone was following us, I said, my mind racing. She turned pale, her breath quickening. Just drive, please. I nodded, panic rising in my chest. I pressed down on the gas pedal, the car speeding down the empty road. The silence in the car was suffocating, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Just keep going, Sarah urged. Don't stop. Don't look back. My mind raced as I focused on the road ahead, desperate to find a way out of this nightmare. But the fog thickened again, the darkness pressing in around us, and I felt the weight of fear settle heavily in my chest. Suddenly, I saw a figure standing in the road ahead, a dark silhouette against the fog. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt, just inches from the figure. My heart raced as I stared at the person standing there. A man, his features obscured by the darkness. "Who the hell is that?" I muttered, my voice trembling. But before Sarah could respond, the man stepped forward, raising his hand as if to signal us to stop. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "What do you mean?" I asked, confusion flooding my thoughts. "There are things out here you don't understand. You need to turn around," he warned, his eyes dark and serious. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you talking about? We're just trying to help this woman." The man glanced at Sarah, his expression shifting from concern to something more sinister. "She shouldn't be with you. She doesn't belong here." I looked at Sarah, her face pale and terrified. "What does he mean?" I asked her, but she was frozen in fear, her eyes wide with terror. "Turn back now," the man shouted, his voice echoing in the darkness. My instincts kicked in, and I turned the car around, desperate to escape the situation. The fog felt like it was closing in around us, and I could feel the weight of something sinister pressing down. As we sped away from the man, I glanced at Sarah. "What the hell was that about?" I demanded. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know. I don't know why I'm here. I just wanted to go for a walk." The weight of her words crashed down on me. Something was horribly wrong. I pressed the accelerator, trying to put as much distance as I could between us and that man. But the fog continued to thicken, and the feeling of being watched crept back in. I glanced around, half expecting to see figures lurking in the shadows. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my racing heart. Suddenly, my headlights flickered and the engine sputtered, a terrifying sound echoing in the night. Panic surged through me as I slammed my foot on the gas, but the car slowed to a crawl. "Why is it stopping?" Sarah cried, her panic rising. "I don't know," I yelled, frantically trying to restart the engine. The car shuddered, the lights dimming. I felt a sense of dread creeping in as the fog closed in tighter around us. "Just get out!" Sarah screamed, her voice filled with desperation. "We have to get out of here." I fumbled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. I can't get the doors open." The car was engulfed in darkness, the fog swirling around us like a living thing. The temperature dropped suddenly, and I felt a chill race through my bones. Then I heard it, a low, haunting whisper, echoing in the silence. "Help me." It was a voice, but it was distorted, as if it was coming from another world. "Did you hear that?" I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah was shaking, her eyes wide with fear. "What is that? What's happening?" I felt trapped, the walls closing in around us. I could see shadows moving just beyond the fog, dark figures lurking in the distance. I pressed my foot down harder on the accelerator, but the engine sputtered again. "Please, just let us go," Sarah cried, her voice filled with terror. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, The fog lifted, and the figures vanished into the night. The car jerked to life again, the headlights flickering back to full strength. "Go!" Sarah screamed, and I slammed my foot on the gas, racing down the empty road. We sped away, leaving the shadows behind us, but the feeling of dread lingered. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of town, my heart racing and my hands shaking. As I pulled into a well-lit gas station, I could feel the weight of the night pressing on me. I turned to Sarah, my heart pounding. "Are you okay?" She was staring blankly out the window, her face pale. I don't know what just happened." I felt a chill race down my spine. "You need to call someone. I can't take you home. Not after that." Sarah nodded, her eyes still distant. "I think I need to call my brother." I handed her my phone, my heart still racing as I stepped out of the car to clear my head. The gas station was brightly lit, but the air felt heavy, as if the night still clung to me. As she made the call, I glanced around, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. I could still feel the echoes of that night, the whispers and shadows haunting my thoughts. A few moments later, Sarah hung up, her expression a mixture of fear and relief. "He's on his way," she said quietly. "Good," I replied, forcing a smile. "You'll be okay now." But as I looked into her eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. I could see it in her gaze, the fear, the uncertainty. It was as if she had been touched by something dark, something that would never fully let her go. As the minutes passed, I found myself glancing nervously at the road, half expecting to see the man or the shadows reappear. But as the headlights of a car approached, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "That's him," Sarah said, her voice shaky. "That's my brother." As the car pulled up, I took a step back, my heart racing. The driver stepped out, a tall man with a worried expression. "Sarah, thank God you're safe," he exclaimed, rushing over to her. I stood back, feeling like an outsider in their reunion. But as I watched them embrace, a sense of unease crept back in. What had happened that night? What had I witnessed? "I'm so glad you're okay," her brother said, glancing at me. "Thank you for helping her." I nodded, forcing a smile, but the fear still clung to me. "I just wanted to make sure she got home safe," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Let's get you out of here," he said, guiding Sarah toward the car. As they climbed in, I felt a knot form in my stomach. I wanted to warn them, to tell them about the shadows and the whispers, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stepped back, watching them drive away. And just like that, they disappeared into the night, leaving me standing alone in the gas station parking lot, the echoes of the fog still haunting me. To this day, I don't know what really happened that night. I never saw Sarah or her brother again, and I often wonder if they made it home safely, or if they too fell victim to the darkness lurking in the woods. Sometimes, late at night, I still drive that road, always on the lookout for the shadows, the whispers. I never stop for hitchhikers anymore, but I can't shake the feeling that something is still out there, waiting, watching, echoing in the night. The late-night shift was always quiet at the gas station. I had taken this job to help pay for college, a part-time gig that would allow me to study during the day and make a little cash at night. My hours were typically uneventful, filled with the occasional customer needing to fill their tank or grab snacks for the road. But one night, everything changed. It was a Friday, and I was nearing the end of my shift. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, the fluorescent lights humming overhead as I flipped through a magazine. Outside, the parking lot was empty, and the highway stretched out like a dark ribbon disappearing into the night. The radio played softly in the background, the DJ chatting about the latest news, but I was barely paying attention. Around 11 p.m., a car pulled into the lot. I looked up and saw a beat-up old sedan with peeling paint. It rolled to a stop, and I could see a young man behind the wheel. He looked nervous, glancing around as if he was unsure of where he was. I straightened up and walked over to help him. "Hey there, need some gas?" I asked, trying to sound friendly. The guy nodded, his eyes darting to the shadows of the parking lot. "Yeah, please. Just $20 on pump 2. I went to ring him up while he got out to fill his tank. I noticed he was shaking, his hands trembling as he handled the nozzle. I didn't think much of it at the time, just assumed he was cold, or maybe just anxious. As I filled out the receipt, I glanced out the window and saw him looking up and down the highway, still fidgety. "Everything all right?" I asked as he stepped back inside the station. Yeah. Just, long night." He forced a smile, but I could see he was lying. "Do you ever get the feeling like you're being watched?" That struck me as odd. "Not really," I said, chuckling nervously, "but I guess it could happen out here in the middle of nowhere." He nodded, clearly agitated, and glanced toward the door. "It's just that I passed a car back there, and I swear they were following me for a while." I tried to reassure him. "You're safe here. We're right on the highway. It's probably just a coincidence." He frowned but nodded, seemingly comforted. After he paid, he filled a small cooler with snacks and hurried out the door, clearly eager to leave. I watched him walk back to his car, my mind drifting back to the mundane tasks I had to finish before closing. As I turned back to the counter, the door jingled behind me. A chill crept down my spine as I felt the air shift. I turned, half expecting another customer, but there was no one there. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to my imagination. Just then, I heard a low rumble, like a car approaching. I looked outside again, just in time to see a sleek black SUV pull into the lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. It parked directly across from the young man's sedan. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off as I watched the driver step out. The figure was tall and wore a black hoodie, their face hidden in the shadows. They walked with an unsettling calmness, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The young man was still standing by his car, clearly oblivious to the danger that was slowly approaching him. "Hey man, you should get going," I called out, trying to warn him without causing panic. He turned, a confused look on his face. "What do you mean?" "Just trust me. It looks like someone's after you." He glanced back toward the SUV, and I could see the fear flicker in his eyes. Just then, the hoodie-clad figure took a step closer, and I felt an urge to rush outside. "Get in your car," I yelled, my heart racing. The young man finally seemed to register the danger and jumped into his sedan, slamming the door shut. The SUV driver stopped in their tracks, staring at him for a moment, before reaching into their pocket and pulling out something metallic. That was when the tension snapped. I ran to the door, my instincts screaming that I needed to do something. "What do you want?" I shouted, trying to buy time for the young man. The figure in the hoodie looked up at me, and I could see the glint of something sharp in their hand. "Nothing you need to worry about, just some unfinished business." Their voice was low and gravelly, sending chills down my spine. The young man revved his engine, and I could see the fear etched on his face. "Please, just leave me alone," he shouted. The figure stepped closer, and without thinking, I grabbed the phone from the counter and dialed 911. "There's a situation at the gas station," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a man being threatened by another man with a knife." "Stay on the line," the operator replied, Help is on the way." As I relayed the situation, I could feel the tension in the air grow thicker. The young man was still inside his car, his eyes wide with fear. The figure took another step toward him, and I could hear the low growl of the engine as the young man tried to back away. Suddenly, without warning, the figure lunged toward the sedan. I heard the screech of tires as the young man slammed on the gas, barely avoiding being cornered. The SUV driver stumbled, but quickly regained their balance and jumped back into their vehicle. I could hardly believe my eyes as the two cars sped out of the gas station, the SUV hot on the young man's tail. "They're leaving," I yelled into the phone, adrenaline pumping through my veins. "Stay where you are," the operator instructed. "Help is on the way." I watched the two vehicles disappear into the distance, a sense of helplessness washing over me. I had never been in a situation like this before, and the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold realization of the danger that had just unfolded. Moments later, sirens pierced the night, and two police cars pulled into the lot. I rushed outside to meet them, my heart still racing. They just left. A young man was being chased by that SUV. The officers nodded, already receiving updates on their radios. "We'll get a description. Can you tell us what happened?" As I recounted the events, I felt a wave of relief when one of the officers turned to his partner. "We need to head south on the highway. That's where they went." I watched as they sped off into the darkness, my heart still pounding in my chest. It felt surreal to have been so close to something so dangerous. The reality of the situation hit me hard. It could have been me in that car. Or worse, I could have been a victim of violence. I spent the rest of my shift in a daze, replaying the events over and over in my mind. The unsettling feeling didn't leave me, lingering long after the police had left with their updates. When I finally finished and locked up the station, I stepped outside into the cool night air. The quiet was deafening, and the shadows of the trees loomed large around me. I hurried to my car, glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the hooded figure lurking nearby. As I drove home, the highway stretched out before me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every shadow seemed to hide something sinister. Every flicker of headlights made my heart race. I was hyper-aware of my surroundings, gripping the steering wheel tightly as I navigated the dark roads. Just as I turned onto a long, isolated stretch of highway, my heart sank. The night was pitch black, the trees closing in around me, and the faint sound of rustling leaves made me jump. I could feel my pulse quicken as I recalled the events at the gas station. Suddenly, I saw headlights behind me, and my stomach twisted. I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a car approaching fast. I pressed the accelerator, my heart pounding. "Come on, just get home," I muttered to myself. But the car didn't seem to slow down. It was gaining on me, and a wave of panic surged through me. "Is it them?" I thought, my heart racing. I could see the headlights brightening in my mirror, illuminating the darkness around me. I turned on my blinker, deciding to pull over at the next exit. But as I did, the car behind me matched my movements, staying right on my tail. I could feel the panic rising, and I pressed the gas even harder, desperate to put distance between us. I sped down the road, my mind racing with fear. What if it's them? I thought. What if they've come to finish what they started? The headlights grew closer, and I could see the outline of the car now, a black SUV. My heart dropped. I had to get away. I could see an off-ramp ahead and took it, my heart racing as I turned sharply. The road was winding and deserted, and I felt a brief flicker of hope. If I could just lose them in the twists and turns, I'd be okay. But as I glanced in my rearview mirror, my blood ran cold. The SUV was still behind me, relentless and unyielding. I glanced at my phone, realizing there was no signal out here. I was completely alone. I had no way to call for help, and the fear surged through me like ice water in my veins. I pushed the gas pedal down harder, but the SUV stayed on my tail, following me relentlessly. My mind raced with thoughts of what I could do. I had to find a place to hide, somewhere to escape this nightmare. Just then, I spotted a small, run-down diner on the side of the road, its neon sign flickering erratically. Without thinking, I took the turn into the parking lot, praying it would be a sanctuary. I parked quickly, glancing back as the SUV slowed to a stop outside. The driver didn't get out, but I could feel their eyes on me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart, and decided to act fast. I fumbled for my phone again, but the signal was still non-existent. I hurried to the diner's door and pushed it open. The bell above jingled softly, and the warm glow of the interior offered a brief sense of relief. The diner was nearly empty, save for a few patrons nursing cups of coffee at the counter. An older woman behind the register looked up and smiled. "Hey there, what can I get you?" I took a shaky breath, my eyes darting to the windows. "Is it okay if I wait here for a bit? I think someone's following me." Her expression shifted from friendly to concerned. "Sure, honey. Just take a seat. I'll keep an eye out." I nodded and hurried to a booth in the back, trying to catch my breath. I could see the SUV through the window, the driver still sitting inside, waiting. Time seemed to stretch as I sat there, my heart racing. The waitress returned with a cup of coffee, her brow furrowed. "You okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "I think I'm being followed. I just want to be safe." "Don't worry. You're safe here," she said firmly, glancing outside. "I'll call the police if I see anything suspicious." I nodded, grateful for her support, but I could feel my fear rising. I glanced out the window again, and the SUV was still there. I wondered if I would ever feel safe again. As the minutes ticked by, I could feel the tension mounting. I sipped my coffee, trying to calm my nerves, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the SUV pulled away from the diner, its headlights disappearing down the road. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by dread. What if they were just waiting for me to leave? I stayed at the diner for a while longer, glancing around nervously as the patrons began to filter out. Eventually, I decided it was time to leave, but my heart raced at the thought of stepping back outside. "Are you sure you're all right?" the waitress asked as I stood to leave. "I think so. Thank you for everything," I replied, forcing a smile. As I stepped outside, I took a deep breath, scanning the parking lot. The SUV was gone, and I felt a small sense of relief. I hurried to my car, glancing over my shoulder, ready to jump in and lock the doors. Once inside, I took a moment to collect myself. I felt shaky and exhausted, but I was finally ready to head home. I started the engine and turned onto the highway, the familiar road offering a sense of normalcy. But the unease didn't leave me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, even as I drove away. The darkness pressed in around me, the trees casting long shadows along the side of the road. I drove slowly, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. I expected to see the black SUV reappear at any moment. Every time I passed a set of headlights, my heart raced, fear flooding my veins. After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached the familiar street that led to my apartment. I turned onto it, relief washing over me as I drove toward the safety of home. But just as I rounded the final corner, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A car parked outside my apartment complex, one that looked eerily familiar. I slowed down, my heart racing as I squinted to see the driver. It was the same black SUV. My stomach dropped as I realized they had followed me home. Panic surged through me, and I quickly turned the car around, my mind racing. What do I do? I can't go home. I thought of calling the police, but the memory of how long it had taken them to arrive earlier sent chills down my spine. Instead, I headed toward a nearby friend's house, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drove, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, praying I wouldn't see the SUV behind me. I took the back roads, weaving through the streets until I finally pulled up in front of my friend's place. I hurried to their door, pounding on it in a panic. "Open up, please," I shouted, my voice shaking. The door swung open, and my friend looked at me, confusion etched on their face. "What's wrong?" "I think someone's following me," I gasped, my breath coming in short bursts. They stepped aside, and I rushed in, feeling a sense of safety wash over me. I quickly explained the situation, and my friend's expression shifted to one of concern. "You need to call the cops." I nodded, my hands shaking as I dialed 911 again. I explained everything, feeling the weight of fear pressing down on me. While I was on the phone, my friend went to look out the window. "There's a car out there. I think it might be the same one," they said, their voice tight. "Please, just stay away from the window," I shouted, terrified of what might happen if they saw us. The police assured me they were on their way, and I hung up, anxiety bubbling in my chest. I could feel the tension building, the darkness outside feeling more threatening than ever. As I paced the living room, I could hear my friend whispering to someone on the phone. I glanced out the window again, half expecting to see the black SUV parked nearby, but it was dark and empty. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sound of sirens filled the air. My friend and I exchanged relieved glances as we heard the police pull up outside. "Thank God," I muttered, rushing to the door. We stepped outside to meet the officers, and I explained everything once more. They took my statement, their faces serious as they listened to my story. "We'll keep an eye out for the vehicle," one officer assured me. "If you see it again, don't hesitate to call." As they left, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was safe for now, but the fear still lingered. The shadows felt deeper, the night more threatening. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every noise and shadow. I replayed the events over and over in my mind, unable to shake the feeling of being hunted. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to return to my normal routine, but the fear followed me like a dark cloud. I avoided driving at night, taking extra precautions whenever I left my apartment. I even changed my work schedule, opting for the day shifts at the gas station instead. But despite my efforts, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Then, one night, a few weeks after the incident, I was in bed, trying to sleep, when I heard a knock at my door. My heart raced as I sat up, straining to listen. It came again, louder this time. I slipped out of bed and crept to the door, peering through the peephole. My stomach dropped as I saw a figure standing outside, their face obscured in shadow. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Let me in," the voice replied, low and gravelly. I recognized it immediately. My heart raced as I backed away from the door, panic flooding my veins. "I'm calling the police." I shouted, my hand shaking as I reached for my phone. "Don't do that," the voice said, an eerie calmness in their tone. "You won't want to make this worse for yourself." I could feel my breath quickening, fear consuming me. I dialed 911 again, keeping the phone pressed to my ear. 911, "What's your emergency?" the operator asked. "There's someone at my door. I think they're here to hurt me," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "Stay on the line. Police are on the way," she replied. I could hear the figure outside shifting, their footsteps echoing softly. "You don't need to do this," they said, their voice chilling me to the bone. "Just let me in." "Get away from my door," I shouted, my heart pounding. The figure paused for a moment, and then I heard a low chuckle. "You think you're safe in there? I can wait all night." I glanced at the window, the darkness outside pressing in around me. Every second felt like an eternity as I waited for the police to arrive. Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard the sound of sirens approaching. The figure outside shifted again, and I held my breath, praying they wouldn't notice the flashing lights. The knock came again, more urgent this time. "You don't want to get me angry," the figure warned, their voice dripping with menace. Just then, the door burst open, and 2 officers rushed inside, their flashlights sweeping the room. "Where are they?" one officer demanded, scanning the area. "They were just here. They were at the door," I cried, feeling a mix of relief and fear. But when they checked outside, the figure was gone, vanished into the night. "We'll need to take your statement," one officer said, leading me back to the living room. As I recounted the events, I could feel the weight of fear lifting slightly. I was safe for now, but I knew I wouldn't be able to shake this experience easily. In the weeks that followed, I did everything I could to regain a sense of normalcy. I focused on my studies, tried to avoid thinking about that night, and leaned on friends for support. But the fear lingered in the back of my mind, a reminder of how quickly things can change. I learned to appreciate the small moments of safety, the feeling of warmth in the daylight. That midnight drive still haunted me, a chilling reminder of how dark and unpredictable the world can be. But as time passed, I found a way to move forward, to reclaim my life from the shadows of that night. I learned that it's important to trust your instincts, to seek help when you need it. The experience taught me the value of community and support, and I vowed to always be aware of my surroundings, no matter where I found myself. And though the fear will always be there, I know I am stronger for having faced it. The midnight highway may be dark and dangerous, but I refuse to let it control my life. I've learned to find light even in the darkest of places. It was a crisp autumn night in October, the kind of evening where the air is thick with the scent of fallen leaves and the moon hangs low, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. I had just finished my shift at the gas station and was exhausted, my body aching from standing for hours on end. I was eager to get home, curl up with a good book, and forget about the long day. But as I climbed into my car and pulled onto the dark highway, little did I know that this would be a night I would never forget. The road was desolate, the only company being the occasional flicker of my headlights cutting through the darkness. I turned on the radio to drown out the silence, flipping through stations until I found a classic rock channel. The music filled the car, but it did little to calm my racing mind. The gas station had been quiet that night, with only a handful of customers coming in. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A strange tension hung in the air. As I drove, I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, feeling an inexplicable sense of paranoia. The emptiness of the highway was unsettling. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just fatigue. But when a pair of headlights appeared behind me, my heart began to race. At first, I thought nothing of it. A late-night driver, perhaps heading to the next town over. But as the car drew closer, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. The car was tailing me too closely. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were just in a hurry, but the driver didn't change lanes. They stayed directly behind me, almost as if they were waiting for me to make a move. My heart raced as I pushed the accelerator slightly, hoping to create some distance. But they matched my speed, the headlights glaring like an angry eye in the darkness. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and panic began to set in. I took a series of turns, hoping to shake them off, but each time I turned, the car was still there, lurking. It was a black sedan, unmarked and ominous, blending into the night. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the kind that makes you feel alive and terrified at the same time. I finally decided to make a bold move. There was a small diner up ahead, one that I knew was open 24 hours. I figured I could stop, get some coffee, and hopefully lose this driver in the process. As I turned into the parking lot, I glanced back at the sedan, my heart pounding in my chest. To my horror, the car followed me in, its headlights illuminating the diner's sign, a flickering neon that promised warmth and safety. I parked hastily, my breath quickening as I glanced at the rearview mirror. The sedan parked a few spots away, and I could see the driver now, a figure in a dark hoodie, face obscured by shadows. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to stay in the car, but I knew I needed to act. I fumbled for my phone, but as I pulled it out, I realized I had no signal. The fear was overwhelming, but I steeled myself and pushed open the car door. The cool night air hit me, and I made my way to the diner's entrance. I glanced back at the sedan, and my heart dropped as I saw the driver getting out. They didn't seem in any hurry, just strolling toward the diner as if they had all the time in the world. Inside, the diner was warm and inviting, filled with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. A few patrons were scattered around, but I felt the tension in the air. I approached the counter, the waitress looking up with a friendly smile. "Hey there, sweetie. What can I get you?" she asked, her voice soothing. "I just need a coffee, please. To go," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure thing, honey," she said, pouring me a cup. As I waited, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder at the entrance. The figure in the hoodie had followed me inside. They stood by the door, scanning the room. My heart raced as they finally caught my gaze, and I quickly looked away, focusing on the counter. "Here you go, dear," the waitress said, placing the coffee in front of me. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. I paid for my coffee and quickly made my way to the door, my eyes darting back to the figure. They hadn't moved, still watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I pushed the door open and stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself, gripping the coffee cup tightly as I hurried to my car. I glanced over my shoulder just in time to see the figure stepping outside, their hood pulled low over their face. Panic surged through me, and I fumbled with my keys, desperately trying to unlock the door. Just as I finally got the door open, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, and my heart dropped as I saw the figure approaching. Hey, wait!" they called out, their voice low and urgent. I didn't think. I jumped into the car, slamming the door shut and locking it just as they reached my window. I could see their face now, pale and gaunt, eyes wide with what seemed like desperation. "Please, you have to help me," they shouted, their voice tinged with panic. "They're coming for me." My heart raced as I tried to process what was happening. "Who's coming for you?" I shouted back, the fear making my voice tremble. "I don't know, but they're following me." The figure looked around, clearly agitated. "I swear, I just need a ride. Please, don't leave me out here." Every instinct in my body screamed at me to drive away. I could see their fear, but there was something unsettling about their demeanor. "I can't help you," I said, my voice firm. "You need to leave." "Please, I'm begging you," they pressed, moving closer to the window, their hands resting on the glass. You don't understand. They won't stop until they find me." I felt a pang of sympathy, but I couldn't ignore the overwhelming sense of danger. "I'm sorry," I said, shaking my head. Suddenly, I heard a noise that made my blood run cold. A loud engine revving outside the diner caught my attention. My gaze snapped toward the entrance, and my heart sank as I saw another vehicle pull into the parking lot, an identical black sedan. "No, no, no," I gasped, panic flooding my veins. "Please, you have to let me in," the figure cried, their voice rising in desperation. "They're here. They're going to find me." I looked back at the sedan, fear coursing through me as the driver stepped out. It was a man, tall and imposing, wearing a dark leather jacket. He scanned the area, eyes narrowing as they landed on me. "I can't stay here," I shouted, my heart racing. I threw the car into reverse and hit the gas, narrowly missing the figure outside as I backed away from the diner. I didn't dare look back as I sped down the highway, my heart pounding in my chest. My thoughts raced, trying to process what had just happened. Had I made the right choice? What if that person had truly been in danger? But the image of the tall man in the leather jacket haunted me. I had seen the intensity in his eyes, and I knew I had narrowly escaped something terrible. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow felt threatening, and the silence of the night weighed heavily on my mind. I kept glancing at my rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights following me again. When I finally reached my apartment complex, I felt a rush of relief. I parked hastily and dashed toward the entrance, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking as I finally got the door open. Once inside, I locked it behind me and leaned against the door, trying to calm my racing heart. I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through me as I replayed the night's events in my mind. The weeks that followed were filled with a mix of relief and anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that clung to me. I avoided late-night drives, and whenever I did have to venture out, I took extra precautions, locking my doors and keeping my phone close at hand. But as the days turned into weeks, I found a sense of normalcy returning. I would often think back to that night, to the figure in the hoodie and the man in the leather jacket. But I tried to push those thoughts aside. That is until one night, about a month later, when I received an unexpected visit from a friend. We were sitting in my living room sipping tea and catching up when there was a loud knock at the door. I froze, my heart dropping into my stomach. The sound echoed through my apartment, and for a moment, I couldn't move. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice shaky. "Open up. It's me," my friend shouted from the other side. Relieved, I unlocked the door and opened it, letting them in. "You scared me," I said, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Sorry, I didn't mean to," they said with a laugh. "But I have something to tell you." As we settled back down, my friend began recounting a story they had heard at work. Apparently, there had been a string of strange occurrences in our town, involving a group of people going missing. The descriptions matched what I had seen that night: people in hoodies and leather jackets, lurking near gas stations and diners. "Some say they're part of a gang, or something even darker," my friend continued, their voice dropping to a whisper. "People are terrified to drive alone at night." A chill ran down my spine, and I felt my stomach twist into knots. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They say they target people who are alone, especially women. It's like they're hunting them," they explained, their eyes wide with fear. I thought back to that night, the feeling of being followed, the desperate plea for help. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't just escaped an uncomfortable situation. I had narrowly avoided something much worse. As the conversation continued, I couldn't shake the fear that had settled in my chest. It was a chilling reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness. I resolved to never let my guard down again. In the months that followed, I remained vigilant. I learned to be aware of my surroundings, to trust my instincts, and to never take my safety for granted. Each time I heard a car pull into my parking lot or a knock on the door, my heart would race with a mix of fear and resolve. That night on the highway was a turning point for me, a reminder of the unpredictability of the world. I learned that while darkness may hold dangers, there is always a way to navigate through it. I vowed to never let fear dictate my life, but rather to embrace the light and warmth of every new day. I still drive at night, but I do so with caution. Each trip is a reminder of the importance of awareness and the strength that comes from facing fear. The long drive home has become a journey of resilience, a testament to my resolve to find safety even in the darkest of nights. I've driven across the country more times than I can count. Long, desolate highways are like second homes to me. You get used to the monotony, the hum of the tires on the asphalt, the headlights illuminating only a small slice of the road ahead. But there's one night, one drive, that's been seared into my memory. I never talk about it, but I'll try to get it out now. It was the single most terrifying experience of my life, and I still don't have an explanation for what happened. It was late October, 3 years ago. I was driving back to California after visiting my sister in Maryland. I always preferred taking the less traveled routes to avoid traffic, which is how I found myself on Route 50. If you've never driven it, Route 50 is known as the loneliest road in America. It stretches through miles of desert, mountains, and ghost towns. You can drive for hours without seeing another car, especially at night. I was a little over 500 miles into the trip, somewhere in Nevada, when things started to get weird. It was a little after midnight, and I was pushing through the fatigue, trying to get as far as I could before I'd need to pull over and sleep. The landscape around me had long since disappeared into the inky blackness of the night, with only the stars and my headlights breaking through the void. The road was empty, just like it had been for hours. No towns, no cars, not even streetlights. It was just me, the road, and the occasional sign warning of steep curves or loose rocks. I had the radio on, playing some late-night talk show to keep me awake. The host was rambling on about UFO sightings, and I remember laughing to myself, thinking how appropriate the topic was given the isolated alien-like landscape around me. But then, out of nowhere, my car's radio cut out. No static, no interference. It just went completely silent. I tapped the screen a few times, trying to get it to come back, but nothing. I wasn't too worried about it. Electronics glitch all the time, especially in the middle of nowhere. I figured I'd lost the signal and shrugged it off. That's when the headlights dimmed for a split second. Not a flicker, but more like they pulsed. Everything in front of me seemed to go a shade darker before returning to normal. I leaned forward, staring at the dashboard, trying to figure out if I'd imagined it or if something was wrong with the car. But the dashboard looked fine. No warning lights, no signs of trouble. I took a deep breath, chalking it up to fatigue. I need to stop soon, I muttered to myself, rubbing my eyes. I was tired, sure, but not so tired that I would hallucinate something like that. Another mile or two went by, and then I saw something in the distance. At first, it was just a faint glow on the horizon, too small and far away to make out. As I got closer, I realized it was a car. The first car I'd seen in hours. Its taillights were barely visible, a dull red glow cutting through the dark. I felt a strange sense of relief. There was something reassuring about seeing another vehicle, like it meant I wasn't entirely alone out there. I kept my distance, not wanting to speed up and tailgate them. Instead, I just maintained a steady pace, figuring I'd eventually catch up to them as they slowed down for the curves in the road ahead. But as I drove closer, I noticed something was off. The taillights of the car in front of me didn't seem to get any closer. They stayed the same distance, no matter how fast I went. I glanced at my speedometer. I was going well over 70 mph now, faster than I should have been on this narrow, winding road. But the car's taillights were still the same, faint, distant red glow. That's weird, I thought. But again, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was an optical illusion, or maybe they were going faster than I realized. Either way, I decided not to worry about it and just focused on driving. A few more minutes passed, and the road started to twist and turn as it climbed into the mountains. I slowed down, expecting the car ahead to do the same, but it didn't. It stayed perfectly steady, never speeding up, never slowing down, just cruising through the curves like they weren't even there. Now, I was starting to feel uneasy. Something about the whole situation wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that the car wasn't really there. It sounds crazy, I know, but that's how it felt. It was like it was just a projection, a mirage, something that wasn't supposed to exist in the real world. I tried to shake off the growing dread in my gut and kept driving. But then, as I rounded a particularly sharp bend, the car's taillights suddenly disappeared. One moment, they were there, and the next, they were gone. Just like that, swallowed up by the darkness. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. Where the hell did they go? I muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. There was no way they could have turned off the road. Not here. There were no exits, no driveways, nothing. Just the road and the mountains. I slowed down, scanning the road ahead for any sign of the car. Nothing. No taillights, no headlights, no sign that anyone had ever been there. I even checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see them behind me, but the road was empty. For the first time that night, I felt real fear. My skin prickled with cold sweat, and my mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, something unnatural. I kept driving, my eyes darting back and forth between the road and my mirrors. After what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a sign for a rest stop up ahead. I didn't care how sketchy it might be. I needed to pull over and collect myself. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, following me. When I reached the rest stop, I pulled in and parked in one of the dimly lit spaces near the building. There were no other cars in the lot. No trucks, no RVs, nothing. Just me, the empty rest stop, and the eerie glow of the vending machines by the entrance. I turned off the engine and sat there for a minute, listening to the silence. My heart was still racing, and my hands felt clammy on the steering wheel. I wanted to believe it was just paranoia, that I'd spooked myself with the talk show and the strange car. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I got out of the car, stretched my legs, and walked over to the vending machines, more for the comfort of their light than because I wanted a snack. The cool night air helped clear my head a bit, and I started to feel a little more grounded. Maybe it had all been in my head. But then, as I turned to head back to my car, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. There, parked at the far end of the lot, where I hadn't noticed it before, was the car. The same car with the taillights. I couldn't see the driver, couldn't make out any details in the dark, but I knew it was the same one. It was just sitting there, its headlights off, as if it had been waiting for me. A wave of cold terror washed over me. I didn't know what to do. Should I get back in my car and leave? Should I go inside the rest stop and hope for help? But there was no one there. No other cars, no trucks, no sign of life. Before I could make a decision, the car's headlights flickered on, bright, blinding, piercing through the darkness and lighting up the entire parking lot. I froze, staring at the car, my mind racing with fear. And then, slowly, the car began to move. Not towards the exit, not down the road, but towards me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted back to my car, fumbling with the keys as my hands shook. I barely managed to unlock the door and jump inside before the car was almost on top of me. I slammed the door shut, turned the ignition, and floored it, not even bothering to look behind me as I peeled out of the parking lot. For the next hour, I drove like a madman, not caring about the speed limit, not caring about anything except putting as much distance as I could between me and that rest stop. I didn't see the car again. No more taillights, no more headlights, nothing. I eventually pulled off the highway, found a motel, and collapsed onto the bed, too exhausted and shaken to even think straight. The next morning, I tried to rationalize it all away. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the car had been a coincidence, and my tired mind had played tricks on me. But deep down, I knew the truth. Something happened on Route 50 that night, something I can't explain. And to this day, every time I drive at night, I can't help but glance in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see those taillights again, glowing faintly in the distance. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who swears off night driving. As a long-haul trucker, night shifts were my bread and butter. The solitude of the open road, the endless stretch of highway beneath a blanket of stars. It was peaceful, almost meditative. I'd been doing it for years, without any real incident. But all that changed on a cold November night, somewhere in the middle of the vast plains of Kansas. I was driving a shipment from Chicago to Denver, a route I'd done dozens of times before. The drive usually took me through long, lonely stretches of highway, where the only signs of life were the occasional headlights of another vehicle, or a distant farmhouse illuminated by a single dim light. It was around 11 p.m. when I crossed into Kansas. I had plenty of coffee in the thermos, a few podcasts loaded up, and the weather was calm. Perfect conditions for a quiet night of driving. The moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light over the rolling hills and flatlands. But for the most part, the only thing I could see was what my headlights cut through in front of me. There was no other traffic, just an endless ribbon of asphalt stretching into the blackness. I wasn't in any rush. I had time to get to Denver by the morning, so I settled into a comfortable pace, keeping my eyes on the road, my mind drifting between the podcast and random thoughts about life. About an hour into Kansas, my radio began to cut in and out. Static would occasionally interrupt the podcast, but I didn't think much of it. I was used to rural areas where signals got weak, and it wasn't unusual for things like that to happen. I turned off the radio to enjoy the quiet for a while. The only sound now was the rumble of the tires on the road and the occasional gust of wind that would rattle through the truck's cabin. And then, I saw something strange up ahead. At first, it was just a small dot of light, way off in the distance. I thought it might be another car, maybe a lone traveler like myself, making their way through the dark. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't moving. It was just hovering. A single dim light on the side of the road, as if someone had parked their car and left their hazard lights on. Curious, I slowed down, keeping my eyes on the light. As I approached, I could make out the shape of an old car, something from the 70s or 80s, parked on the shoulder. The light was coming from one of its taillights, flickering weakly like the bulb was dying. The car's windows were down, and there was no one inside. No sign of an accident, no flat tires, nothing to suggest why it was sitting there abandoned. I rolled past it slowly, feeling an odd chill crawl up my spine. I've seen my share of broken down cars on the highway, but something about this one felt off. Maybe it was the fact that the car was so old, or that it was in the middle of nowhere with no one around. Or maybe it was just my imagination running wild after hours of solitude on the road. Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I drove past, I glanced in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone emerge from the shadows or wave me down for help. But the car just sat there, its lone taillight flickering in the dark. I shrugged it off and kept driving. I had a schedule to keep, and stopping to investigate wasn't something I wanted to do in the middle of the night. Still, the image of that old car lingered in the back of my mind, and I couldn't help but feel uneasy as I continued down the highway. 15 minutes later, something even stranger happened. My headlights briefly illuminated a figure standing on the side of the road. It was just a flash, but I saw it clearly. A person, dressed in dark clothes, standing near the edge of the highway, facing the road as if they were waiting for something or someone. The figure was so still, it didn't even seem to react as my truck barreled past. My heart jumped into my throat. I instinctively hit the brakes, slowing down to get a better look in my mirrors. But by the time I checked, the figure was gone. There was no sign of anyone, just the empty road stretching out behind me. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Who the hell stands on the side of a desolate highway at this time of night? There were no houses around, no towns for miles, and the way the figure just stood there, motionless, gave me a feeling I couldn't shake, like it was waiting for me. I accelerated, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe it was a hitchhiker or some drifter, someone who had broken down and wandered off for help. But deep down, I didn't believe that. The image of the figure, so still and dark, kept playing over and over in my head. The next half hour passed in silence. I kept my eyes glued to the road, my nerves on edge, glancing at the rearview mirror more often than I'd like to admit. I was starting to think I should have taken a different route. Maybe stopped at a rest area for the night instead of driving straight through. But there was no turning back now. Then, just as I was beginning to relax a bit, the truck's headlights flickered. It was subtle at first, a brief dimming, like a power surge. I frowned, glancing down at the dashboard. No warning lights, no sign that anything was wrong with the truck. But then it happened again. This time, the lights dimmed more noticeably, almost as if something was drawing power from them. My pulse quickened. Electrical issues out here in the middle of nowhere? Not good. I reached for the CB radio to see if any other truckers were nearby, but before I could key the mic, the headlights flickered one last time, then cut out completely. Suddenly, I was plunged into total darkness. The truck continued to roll forward, but without the headlights, I couldn't see a thing. My heart raced as I fumbled for the switches, trying to get the lights back on. The dashboard lights were still on, and the engine was running fine, but the road ahead of me was swallowed up in blackness. And then, I heard it. A voice, faint, almost like a whisper, coming from somewhere behind me. I whipped my head around, eyes wide, but the cabin was empty. I was alone. I clenched the steering wheel, trying to steady my breathing, but the voice came again, closer this time. "Help me?" It was a woman's voice, soft but urgent, like someone pleading for help in the distance. My skin crawled, and my hands shook as I gripped the wheel tighter. I slammed my foot on the brake, bringing the truck to a shuddering halt. The voice had sounded like it was coming from the sleeper cabin behind me. I knew that was impossible. There was no one in the truck but me. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was in there with me. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening. The wind howled outside, and the truck creaked softly as it settled on the asphalt. But there were no other sounds, no more voices. I exhaled slowly, trying to convince myself that I'd imagined it, that the long hours and isolation were playing tricks on my mind. But just as I was about to start driving again, the voice came one more time. "Please, help me." I froze, my blood turning to ice. This time, it was right behind me, just inches from my ear. In a panic, I reached for the door handle, ready to bolt out of the truck and into the cold night. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the voice stopped. The headlights flickered back on, illuminating the road ahead of me once again. I sat there, breathing heavily, my mind racing. I didn't understand what had just happened. I didn't want to understand. All I knew was that I needed to get the hell out of there. I threw the truck into gear and floored it, speeding down the highway as fast as I could without looking back. The voice was gone, but the fear stayed with me, gnawing at the back of my mind like a shadow that refused to leave. For the rest of the night, I didn't see any more strange lights or figures on the side of the road. No more whispers, no more flickering headlights, but the feeling of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the edge of the darkness, stayed with me until the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. When I finally reached Denver the next morning, I was exhausted, mentally and physically. I pulled into the yard, parked the truck, and sat there for a moment, trying to process what had happened. I wanted to tell someone, to ask if they'd ever experienced anything like that, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. It sounded insane. I chalked it up to fatigue, to long hours on the road, but deep down, I knew something had happened that night, something I couldn't explain. I've been a trucker for nearly 15 years, and I've never had an experience like that before, or since. But I'll tell you this, I don't drive that stretch of highway at night anymore. And whenever I'm out on the road in the dark, I keep the radio on, the lights bright, and my eyes peeled for anything that doesn't belong. Because once you've heard those whispers, you can never forget them. And you'll always wonder if they're still out there, waiting for you in the dark. It was late, way too late to be driving, but I was wide awake and determined to make it to my destination before dawn. I've always been a night owl, the kind of guy who enjoys the solitude that comes with driving long stretches of empty highway. The darkness, the quiet, the isolation. It gave me time to think, to be alone with my thoughts. But that particular night on Route 93, heading through the Nevada desert, I found out just how dangerous solitude can be. I had left Las Vegas around 9:00 p.m. after visiting some friends for the weekend. I was heading north to Eerie, a small town in the middle of nowhere. It's about a 5-hour drive, mostly through empty desert. I figured I'd push through the night, make it there by early morning, and catch a few hours of sleep before starting my work meeting at noon the next day. The drive was going fine for the first couple of hours. The desert at night is a strange place, vast, silent, with nothing but stars and moonlight stretching over miles of sand and scrub. The highway was completely empty, no cars, no trucks, just me and the road. At first, I enjoyed the isolation. I rolled down the window, letting the cool desert air rush into the car, and turned on some music to break the silence. The miles flew by in a blur of black asphalt and white lane markers. Occasionally, a road sign would pop up, warning of the next gas station 50 or 100 miles ahead. But otherwise, there was nothing but darkness. Around midnight, I noticed something strange in the distance. At first, it was just a small speck on the horizon, barely noticeable under the pale moonlight. I squinted, trying to make out what it was. As I got closer, I realized it was a person, standing on the side of the road, just outside the reach of my headlights. Now, I've always been wary of picking up hitchhikers. It's not something I've ever done. You hear too many horror stories, especially out in the middle of nowhere like this. But something about the figure on the road made me hesitate. As I approached, I could see it was a man, tall, dressed in dark clothes. He wasn't holding out his thumb like most hitchhikers. He was just standing there, staring at the road ahead. I slowed down as I got closer, my headlights washing over him. He turned his head slightly to look at me, and for a brief moment, I saw his face. A gaunt, pale face, with hollow eyes that seemed too large for his skull. His skin was grayish, like he hadn't seen the sun in years. I sped up. I don't know why, but something about him set off every alarm bell in my head. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to offer help. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. As I passed him, I glanced in my rearview mirror, expecting to see him disappear into the darkness. But he didn't. He was still there, standing on the side of the road, watching me drive away. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed down on the gas. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that it was just some guy, probably broke down or walking to the nearest town. But the way he looked at me, there was something in his eyes that chilled me to the bone. It wasn't desperation or hope, like you'd expect from someone stranded on the side of the road. It was emptiness, like he wasn't even human. I pushed the thought out of my mind and focused on the road ahead. The last thing I needed was to freak myself out in the middle of the desert. After a few miles, I convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I was more tired than I thought, or maybe the shadows had played tricks on me. But then, something even stranger happened. About 20 minutes later, I saw another figure up ahead. At first, I thought it was another hitchhiker, but as I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was the same man, the same gaunt face, the same hollow eyes, standing on the side of the road, just like before. I slammed on the brakes, my car skidding to a stop in the middle of the highway. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. I hadn't passed any cars, any intersections, any side roads. He couldn't have been hitchhiking, not unless he had somehow teleported miles ahead of me. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my heart racing. I stared at him through the windshield, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. He stood there, motionless, his eyes locked on mine. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I didn't know what to do. Every instinct in my body was telling me to drive, to get out of there as fast as I could, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, frozen in place, staring back at him. Then, slowly, he started walking toward my car. I floored it. The tires squealed as I took off down the highway, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away from him. The road blurred in front of me as I sped down the empty highway, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see him standing behind me. But the road stayed empty. No sign of him, no other cars, nothing. Just miles and miles of darkness stretching out in front of me. I drove for what felt like hours, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I didn't dare slow down. I didn't dare stop. I just kept going, hoping to reach the next town, the next gas station, anywhere with lights and people. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw the glow of lights in the distance. I breathed a sigh of relief as I pulled into the small town of Eerie. It was just after 2 a.m., and the streets were deserted. But I didn't care. I needed to get off the road. I found a small, rundown motel on the edge of town and pulled into the parking lot. My hands were shaking as I turned off the engine and got out of the car. I glanced around, half expecting to see the man standing somewhere nearby. But the lot was empty. I checked into the motel, barely able to speak as I handed my credit card to the clerk. He didn't ask any questions, just handed me the key and pointed down the hall to my room. I locked the door behind me, double-checking it twice before collapsing onto the bed. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, those hollow eyes staring back at me. I tossed and turned for hours, jumping at every little noise outside, convinced that he had followed me, that he was waiting just outside the door. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I drifted into a restless sleep. But the dreams were worse. In every dream, I was back on that highway, driving through the desert, the man standing on the side of the road, watching me. No matter how fast I drove, no matter how far I went, he was always there, waiting. When I woke up the next morning, I felt like I hadn't slept at all. I checked out of the motel as soon as the sun was up and got back on the road, eager to put as much distance as I could between me and that stretch of highway. I made it to my meeting in Eerie, but I barely remember a word of it. My mind was still back on Route 93, replaying that night over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it. I've driven that route a few times since then, but never at night. I refuse to drive through the desert after dark. I don't care how long the trip takes or how much daylight I have to burn. I won't risk seeing him again. I've tried telling a few people about what happened, but no one believes me. They say it was just my imagination, that I was tired, that the desert can play tricks on your mind when you're alone at night. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was all in my head. But deep down, I know what I saw. I know that man was real, and I know I wasn't supposed to see him. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving alone on some dark, empty highway, I can still feel those hollow eyes watching me from the shadows. I don't know who or what he was, but I know one thing for sure. I'm never picking up a hitchhiker on a lonely road again. Ever. I'm not sure how to start this story. It's the kind that sounds ridiculous until it happens to you. But after what I experienced, I'm done driving at night, especially through remote back roads. And if you've ever been out in the middle of nowhere after dark, you'll understand why. This was a couple of years ago, in the fall. I was driving home after visiting my parents in rural Pennsylvania. They live way out in the countryside, where there are more cows than people, and every town is a half-hour apart. I live in Pittsburgh, and my usual route takes me along the main highways. But that night, I decided to take a shortcut through the back roads. It wasn't my first time going that way, but it was definitely the last. It was late, around 11 p.m., and the night had settled in thick and cold. The air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke, and the sky was so dark, it felt like you could reach out and touch the stars. I had about 2 hours of driving left, and I figured I could shave off some time by taking Red Hollow Road, an old winding path that cuts through the woods and bypasses several small towns. It's a narrow road, barely wide enough for 2 cars, and it twists and turns through dense forest for about 20 miles before spitting you back out onto the highway. I hadn't driven it in a while, but I remembered it being a little eerie. There are no streetlights, no houses, nothing but trees, and the occasional deer darting across the road. But I wasn't worried. I'd driven that road during the day many times, and, despite its isolation, I knew it well enough to feel comfortable. Plus, I had just refueled, and my phone was charged with GPS on, so I felt good about the decision. As soon as I turned onto Red Hollow Road, I regretted it. The road was pitch black, swallowed by the overhanging branches of the trees. My headlights barely pierced the darkness, illuminating only a few feet ahead before getting swallowed by the shadows. There was no one else around, no cars behind me, no oncoming traffic, just me and the road. I turned the radio down, suddenly feeling the need for quiet, and focused on driving. The road was narrow and full of sharp curves. I had to take it slow, weaving around bends and dips in the asphalt. I could hear the crunch of leaves under my tires, the occasional rustling of branches in the wind. But other than that, it was silent. A deep, unnerving kind of silence that made me feel like I was driving through a tunnel cut off from the rest of the world. A few miles in, I noticed something strange. It started as a subtle flicker at the edge of my vision, like a shadow moving just outside the reach of my headlights. I glanced over, but there was nothing, just the trees, standing tall and dark along the road. I shook it off, figuring it was my mind playing tricks on me. After all, it was late, and I was probably more tired than I realized. But then, I saw it again. This time, it was clearer. A dark figure, moving just beyond the tree line, keeping pace with my car. I glanced over again, and for a split second, I thought I saw a person. Someone tall and thin, moving quickly through the woods. But before I could get a good look, they disappeared into the darkness. I slowed down, squinting into the trees, but there was nothing, just shadows and branches swaying in the wind. Must be a deer, I muttered to myself, trying to shake the creeping feeling crawling up my spine. But something about the way the figure moved didn't sit right with me. It was too fast, too smooth, like it was gliding through the trees rather than walking. I picked up speed, trying to push the thought from my mind. But the further I drove, the worse the feeling got. It was like the road itself was closing in on me, the trees leaning closer, the darkness pressing in from all sides. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and I found myself leaning forward, peering into the gloom as if something might leap out at any moment. Then, the figure appeared again. This time, it was closer, darting between the trees on the right side of the road. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the narrow road. My heart was pounding, my breath coming in short gasps. I scanned the woods, my headlights sweeping over the trees, but there was nothing, just darkness and silence. I sat there for a moment, trying to calm my nerves. It's nothing, I told myself. Just a trick of the light. You're tired. You're seeing things. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I had seen something real, something that didn't belong in the woods. I forced myself to start driving again, keeping my speed slow, my eyes darting from the road to the trees. Every few minutes, I would catch a glimpse of movement, a shadow slipping between the trunks, a dark shape flitting through the underbrush, and every time, it was closer. I was about halfway through Red Hollow Road when I noticed the temperature drop. It wasn't just a slight chill. It was like the air had been sucked out of the car, replaced with an icy, bone-deep cold. My breath fogged up in front of me, and I turned up the heat, but it didn't help. The cold wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from within the car. I glanced at the passenger seat, my heart skipping a beat. There, in the seat next to me, was a shadow. Not a person, not a solid figure, but a dark, formless mass, like smoke or mist. It was faint, barely visible in the dim light of the dashboard, but it was there, sitting in my car, right next to me. I swerved, nearly running off the road, and slammed on the brakes again. The shadow vanished as soon as the car stopped, leaving me gasping for air, my heart racing in my chest. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, and stared at the empty seat, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. For a long moment, I just sat there, frozen in place. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I had seen something I couldn't explain, something that wasn't supposed to be there. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement again. But this time, it wasn't in the woods. It was right outside my window. I whipped my head to the left, my heart pounding in my chest. There, standing just a few feet away from my car, was a figure. Tall, thin, shrouded in darkness, its face obscured by shadow. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there, staring at me through the glass. I couldn't see its eyes, but I could feel them, burning into me, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to throw the car into reverse and get the hell out of there, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear, my hands locked onto the steering wheel, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The figure took a step closer, its movements slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. My heart raced, my mind screaming at me to move, to do something, but I couldn't. I just sat there, helpless, as it leaned down, its face inches from the window. And then, without warning, it disappeared. 1 second it was there, and the next, it was gone, vanished into the night like it had never been there at all. I didn't wait to find out what would happen next. I floored the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I sped down the road, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't care about the curves, didn't care about the danger. I just needed to get out of there. The car tore through the darkness, the headlights cutting through the trees, but I didn't dare look at the woods. I didn't dare look at anything but the road ahead. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the end of Red Hollow Road. The trees thinned out, the darkness lifting as I approached the highway. I breathed a sigh of relief, my hands shaking on the wheel, and pulled onto the main road without looking back. I didn't stop driving until I reached the outskirts of Pittsburgh. It was nearly 3 a.m. by the time I pulled into my driveway, exhausted and shaken, but grateful to be home. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the empty passenger seat, trying to make sense of what had happened. But there was no explanation, no reason for what I had seen, what I had felt. I haven't driven down Red Hollow Road since that night. In fact, I avoid back roads altogether now, especially after dark. I've tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that I was tired and seeing things, but deep down, I know that isn't true. Because sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving alone, I catch a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow slipping between the trees, a figure standing just outside the reach of my headlights. And I know it's still out there, waiting. It was the kind of night that wraps around you like a heavy blanket, the air thick and suffocating, with only the distant hum of the highway keeping me company. I've always loved the open road, the way the miles stretch out endlessly before you, the silence broken only by the low rumble of the engine. But on this particular night, something about the darkness felt different, more oppressive, like it was swallowing me whole as I drove deeper into it. I was on my way home from a late shift at work, the kind of job that keeps you in the office long past the point of exhaustion. It was close to midnight when I finally got on the road, the only car on a deserted stretch of highway between West Virginia and Ohio. I'd driven this route 100 times before, usually without a second thought. But that night, something was off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't as alone as I thought. There's a section of the road known as Dead Man's Curve, a sharp turn that's infamous among locals. People say the curve got its name because of the number of fatal accidents that have happened there over the years. I'd always figured it was just one of those local legends designed to scare the tourists. But the fact remains, people have died there. Drivers unfamiliar with the curve often go too fast, lose control, and plunge off the side of the road into the dense forest below. The drop is steep, and the trees are thick enough that if you go over, no one's finding you for days. That night, Dead Man's Curve was the last thing on my mind. I had another hour or so of driving before I'd be home, and I was just trying to stay awake. My eyes were heavy, and I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me. The road was dark, the only light coming from my headlights as they cut through the inky blackness ahead. Then, out of nowhere, I saw it. A car, or what was left of one, just off the side of the road, half hidden by the trees. Its headlights were off, and the front end was crumpled in, like it had hit something hard. My first thought was that it was an abandoned wreck, maybe from one of the accidents I'd heard about. But something about it didn't feel right. The car wasn't old and rusted like you'd expect an abandoned wreck to be. It looked fresh. I slowed down as I approached, my heart picking up speed. I scanned the area, looking for any sign of life, but there was nothing. No movement, no sound. Just the mangled car sitting there, like it had been left behind. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. My gut was telling me to keep driving, that there was something wrong here, but I couldn't just leave without checking. What if someone was hurt? What if they were still inside? I grabbed my phone and flicked on the flashlight as I stepped out of the car. The air outside was colder than I expected, a sharp bite against my skin. I walked slowly toward the wreck, every step feeling heavier than the last. The closer I got, the more I could see the extent of the damage. The windshield was shattered, and the front bumper was hanging off, barely clinging to the frame. When I reached the car, I hesitated for a moment before shining the light inside. The driver's seat was empty, no sign of anyone. I exhaled a shaky breath, feeling a strange mix of relief and confusion. There was no one here, no driver, no passengers, just the wreck, sitting there like a ghost on the side of the road. I turned to head back to my car, but as I did, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There, on the ground next to the wreck, was a single footprint. It was faint, but unmistakable, pressed into the soft dirt just beside the car. And it wasn't old. Whoever had left it hadn't been gone for long. Suddenly, the air around me felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me from all sides. I couldn't explain it, but I had the overwhelming sense that I was being watched. My heart was pounding in my chest as I turned in a slow circle, scanning the darkness with my flashlight. That's when I heard it. A soft rustling sound coming from the trees just beyond the wreck. It wasn't loud, but in the stillness of the night, it might as well have been a gunshot. My flashlight beam swung in the direction of the sound, but all I saw was the thick wall of trees, their branches swaying slightly in the breeze. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to get the hell out of there. But before I could turn and run, something moved. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, maybe the shadows playing games with my tired mind. But then I saw it again, a figure, barely visible through the trees, standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight. It was tall, unnaturally thin, and its movements were jerky, like it wasn't used to walking on two legs. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in place, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching me from the shadows. I couldn't make out its face, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold and unblinking. Then, slowly, it started to move toward me. I didn't think, I just ran. I sprinted back to my car, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear footsteps behind me, faster now, gaining on me with every second. I didn't dare look back. I fumbled with my keys as I reached the door, my hands shaking so badly that I nearly dropped them. Somehow, I managed to get the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut just as the footsteps stopped. For a second, there was silence. My breath came in ragged gasps as I sat there, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. My headlights illuminated the road ahead, but when I looked back toward the wreck, there was nothing. No figure, no footsteps, just the car, sitting there like it had been all along. I floored the gas pedal and took off, my tires screeching as I sped down the highway. I didn't care about the speed limit, didn't care about anything except putting as much distance between me and that thing as possible. My hands were shaking, my heart still racing as I drove, glancing nervously at the rearview mirror every few seconds. But the road behind me was empty. No car, no figure, no sign of anything out of the ordinary. By the time I reached the next town, I had convinced myself that it had all been in my head. Maybe I was just exhausted from the long day. Maybe the darkness and isolation had gotten to me. I pulled into a gas station and sat there for a while, trying to calm down, telling myself that it was over. But it wasn't. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I had barely slept, tossing and turning all night, with images of that figure running through my head. When I finally got out of bed, I checked my phone and saw a news alert that made my stomach drop. There had been a fatal car accident on Dead Man's Curve the night before. A car had gone off the road, plunging into the ravine below. The driver was found dead at the scene, and from the pictures, I recognized the car immediately. It was the wreck I had seen. But that wasn't the part that sent chills down my spine. The article mentioned that the accident had occurred around 10:30 p.m., about half an hour before I had driven past the wreck. There was no way I could have seen that car. I tried to rationalize it, tried to convince myself that maybe I had seen a different car, that the figure in the woods was just my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had seen something that night, something that wasn't supposed to be there. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the figure in the woods wasn't just some random apparition. It had been watching me, following me. And even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there, waiting for me. I've taken a different route home ever since. I avoid Dead Man's Curve like the plague, and I refuse to drive that stretch of road at night. But sometimes, when I'm alone on a dark highway, I catch a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror. A shadow, a figure, just for a split second before it disappears. And I know that whatever I saw that night is still with me, lurking just beyond the edge of the road, waiting for the right moment to show itself again. And when it does, I'm not sure I'll be able to outrun it this time. I've been driving trucks for over 20 years now. You'd think that after spending that much time on the road, you'd have seen everything. You get to know the rhythm of the highway, the endless stretches of asphalt, the hum of the engine as your only companion. But there are some nights when the road doesn't feel so familiar, when it seems to change, to come alive in ways that don't make sense. I used to shrug off stories about haunted highways, but that was before it happened to me. It was late October, and I was headed eastbound on a stretch of road that cuts through some of the more rural parts of Nebraska. Route 87 is the kind of road where you can go miles without seeing another car, especially at night. It's lonely, quiet, and more than a little unsettling, even if you're used to it. I was driving overnight to make up some time, hauling a load of construction equipment to a job site in Illinois. The night was clear but cold, and the wind had started to pick up as I hit the darker, more isolated sections of the highway. I've always enjoyed driving at night. There's something peaceful about it, the way the world seems to slip away, leaving just you and the road. But on this particular night, I had a strange feeling I couldn't shake. It started small, just an uneasy sensation in my gut, like I was being watched. At first, I thought it was just fatigue. I'd been driving for hours and hadn't stopped for a break in a while. But the further I drove, the stronger the feeling got. The stretch of highway I was on was known for its accidents, sharp curves, narrow lanes, and no lighting at all, except for the high beams from your own truck. It's easy to get lost in your thoughts out there, easy to drift into a kind of highway hypnosis, where the lines on the road blur together and time seems to stretch out endlessly. I passed a small, broken-down rest stop around 2 a.m. and thought about pulling in, but something about it gave me the creeps. It was completely abandoned, the windows dark, and the sign out front was faded and barely legible. So I kept driving, hoping to find another rest stop a few miles ahead. That's when things started to get weird. About 20 minutes after passing the rest stop, I noticed something on the side of the road up ahead. At first, I thought it was just my tired eyes playing tricks on me. But as I got closer, I realized it was a figure standing there, right on the shoulder of the highway, in the middle of nowhere. It was a woman. At least, I think it was. She was wearing what looked like a long, dark coat, and her hair was hanging loose around her shoulders. She wasn't moving, just standing there, staring out at the road as my truck approached. I slowed down instinctively, my heart skipping a beat. What the hell was she doing out here? There were no houses, no towns, nothing for miles. It didn't make sense. As I got closer, I thought about pulling over to see if she needed help. Maybe her car had broken down, or she was hitchhiking, though it seemed like an odd place to do that in the dead of night. But something about her stopped me. She didn't look distressed or lost. She wasn't waving her arms or trying to flag me down. She was just standing there, perfectly still, watching as my truck came toward her. I slowed down even more, but I didn't stop. There was something off about her, something I couldn't put my finger on, but it set every instinct in me on edge. Her face was pale, almost too pale in the glow of my headlights, and her eyes. I don't know how to explain it, but they looked wrong, like they were too wide, too dark, like they didn't belong on her face. As I passed her, I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, refusing to look back in the rearview mirror. The air in the cab felt thick, heavy, like the temperature had dropped by 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. My hands were clammy on the steering wheel, my heart racing for no reason I could explain. For the next mile or so, I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a weird trick of the light. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. But the unease wouldn't go away. It lingered, creeping up my spine like a cold hand resting on the back of my neck. That's when I saw her again. Up ahead, standing on the side of the road, just like before. I slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt as my heart leapt into my throat. There was no way she could have gotten there ahead of me. I hadn't passed any cars, hadn't seen any turnoffs or side roads. But there she was, standing there, her dark figure illuminated by the high beams of my truck. I sat there for a long moment, my hands shaking on the wheel, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what to do. Part of me wanted to throw the truck into reverse and get the hell out of there. But another part of me, the part that didn't want to believe what I was seeing, wanted to go closer, to figure out what the hell was going on. Against my better judgment, I pulled the truck forward, slowly rolling closer to where she stood. As I did, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Her feet weren't touching the ground. She was hovering there, just a few inches off the pavement, swaying slightly in the wind. Her face was still turned toward the road, still watching me, but there was something wrong with her eyes, like they were empty, black holes staring out from a face that wasn't quite human. I don't know what came over me in that moment, but I slammed on the gas and sped past her, the truck lurching forward as the engine roared to life. I didn't care about the speed limit, didn't care about the curves ahead. I just needed to get away from her, to put as much distance between me and whatever the hell that thing was. I drove for what felt like hours, my knuckles white on the wheel, my heart pounding in my chest. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see her standing there again, watching me. But the road behind me was empty, and after a while, I started to calm down. That's when the radio cut out. 1 second, it was playing a classic rock station, the only thing keeping me grounded in reality. And the next, it was just static. I glanced down at the dashboard, fiddling with the dials, but nothing happened. Just static, hissing through the speakers. And then, through the static, I heard something else. A voice. It was faint at first, barely audible, but it grew louder, more distinct. A woman's voice, whispering something I couldn't understand. I turned the radio off, but the whispering didn't stop. It was coming from somewhere else, from inside the cab. I froze, my eyes flicking to the passenger seat. It was empty, of course, but the whispering continued, growing louder, more insistent. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew they weren't meant for me. They were meant for her. I gripped the wheel tighter, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I had to get out of there. I had to get off this road. I spotted an exit sign up ahead, a small town, maybe a few miles off the highway. I didn't care where it led, as long as it got me off that road. I took the exit at full speed, the tires screeching as I careened onto the off-ramp. The whispering stopped as soon as I left the highway, leaving only the sound of my own ragged breathing in its wake. The town I pulled into was small, barely more than a few houses and a gas station. I parked the truck in the lot and sat there for a long time, trying to calm myself down. The whispering was gone, the temperature in the cab back to normal, but I couldn't shake the image of her face, those black, empty eyes staring out at me from the side of the road. I slept in the truck that night, too shaken to keep driving. In the morning, I called my dispatcher and told him I'd be late delivering the load. I didn't explain why, and he didn't ask. I'm sure I wasn't the first driver to have a rough night on the road, but I knew it wasn't just a rough night. Something had happened out there, something I still can't explain. I've heard stories from other truckers about strange things on the highway, about phantom hitchhikers and ghost cars that appear out of nowhere. I always thought they were just stories, the kind of tales you tell to pass the time. But after that night, I'm not so sure. I still drive Route 87 from time to time, but I won't drive it at night anymore. I avoid that stretch of road like the plague, especially around Dead Man's Curve. And whenever I do have to drive it, I make sure to keep the radio off. Because sometimes, late at night, when the highway is empty and the sky is dark, I can still hear that whispering, and I know she's still out there, waiting for her next ride. I've always considered myself a practical man. I don't believe in ghosts or spirits, or any of those tall tales that make the rounds in truck stops late at night. I'm a long-haul driver, and I've spent more time on the road than I have at home. The highway is my life. I've seen just about everything out there: accidents, wildlife, freak weather. But there's one night I'll never forget. A night that changed the way I see the road forever. It was mid-November, a couple of years ago. I had a run that took me from Colorado to California, hauling a load of electronics. My route took me through the Rockies and along a stretch of desolate highway that most drivers avoided after dark. It wasn't a particularly dangerous road, no sharp curves or cliffs to worry about, but it had a reputation. It was known as one of those places where the land felt untouched, like the earth held on to secrets that humans weren't supposed to uncover. I didn't care about that stuff. To me, it was just another road, another stretch of asphalt to get across. I'd driven it before without any trouble, and I had no reason to think this time would be any different. I was wrong. I left Denver around 6 p.m., aiming to make good time before stopping for the night. The weather had been clear, but as I climbed higher into the mountains, a heavy fog began to roll in. By the time I was well into the Rockies, visibility had dropped to nearly nothing. The fog clung to the road, thick and oppressive, and my headlights barely cut through it. It felt like driving through a cloud, with only the white lines on the asphalt to guide me. The radio signal faded not long after I hit the fog, leaving me alone with the hum of the engine and the occasional crunch of gravel under my tires. It was the kind of silence that wraps around you, making you feel like you're the only person left in the world. After a couple of hours, I was starting to feel the effects of fatigue. The rhythmic droning of the truck's engine was lulling me into a dangerous state of drowsiness. My eyelids felt heavy, and I knew I needed to pull over soon to get some rest. There was a small rest area coming up in about 10 miles, so I pushed on, focusing on the road and trying to stay awake. That's when I noticed the first odd thing. I was coming around a bend when I saw something on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a deer or some other animal, but as I got closer, I realized it was a person, a man, standing in the fog just beyond the reach of my headlights. He was motionless, standing right on the edge of the highway, his face obscured by the fog. I slowed down as I passed him, my eyes flicking over to get a better look. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, with his back turned to the road. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't try to flag me down, just stood there, perfectly still, as my truck rumbled by. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was a hitchhiker, or someone whose car had broken down. But where was his vehicle? There hadn't been any cars on the road for miles, and I hadn't seen any signs of an accident. I kept driving, but the image of that man stayed with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. Something about him hadn't been right. I don't know how to explain it, but there was a sense of wrongness about the whole thing, like he didn't belong there. The fog seemed to grow thicker as I continued, wrapping around the truck like a living thing. My headlights struggled to penetrate it, and the silence felt oppressive, almost suffocating. I kept glancing in my mirrors, half expecting to see something following me, but the road behind me was empty. About 5 miles later, I saw it again. This time, it was a woman, standing in the same spot on the side of the road. She was dressed in a long coat, her hair hanging loose around her shoulders. Just like the man, she was standing perfectly still, facing away from the road, her figure barely visible through the fog. My heart skipped a beat as I passed her. It was the same eerie stillness, the same sense of wrongness. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge the truck as it passed by. It was like she was frozen in place. Now I was starting to feel genuinely uneasy. I've been on the road long enough to know when something's not right. And this was one of those times. I couldn't shake the feeling that these weren't just random people standing on the side of the road. Something about them felt off, like they weren't really there. I checked the clock on the dashboard, 2:35 a.m. The rest area should have been just a couple of miles ahead. I decided I'd pull in there, take a break, and try to shake off the strange feeling that had settled over me. But when I reached the spot where the rest area should have been, there was nothing. No sign, no turnoff, just more fog and empty highway stretching ahead of me. I slowed the truck to a crawl, frowning as I double-checked my GPS. It showed that I should have reached the rest area by now, but the screen was flickering, the signal weak in the mountains. I had been relying on memory for this stretch of the route, and now I was beginning to question if I had missed the turn. Frustrated, I kept driving, hoping to find a place to pull over soon. My eyes were heavy, my body aching from hours behind the wheel. The fog was relentless, pressing in on all sides, and the road seemed to stretch out endlessly before me, with no sign of civilization in sight. That's when I saw the car. It was parked on the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking weakly through the fog. I slowed down as I approached, peering through the windshield to get a better look. It was an old sedan, the kind you don't see much anymore. Something out of the 80s, with rust eating away at the edges. I didn't see anyone inside, but the driver's door was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. My heart started pounding in my chest as I rolled to a stop a few yards behind the car. There was no movement, no sign of the driver. For a moment, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel tightly, debating whether I should get out and check. Every instinct in me was screaming to keep driving, to leave the car behind and not look back. But what if someone was hurt? What if they needed help? Reluctantly, I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the truck. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face, the fog immediately swallowing me up as soon as I set foot on the pavement. I could barely see the outline of the car in front of me, the blinking hazard lights casting eerie shadows through the mist. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and muffled in the thick fog. "Anyone there?" No response. I approached the car slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the fog. The inside of the car was empty. The seats were worn and covered in dust, like the car had been sitting there for years. But the engine was still warm, and the driver's seatbelt was unbuckled, hanging loosely to the side. A cold knot of dread tightened in my stomach as I shone the light around the area. There were no footprints, no signs of anyone walking away from the car. It was like the driver had simply vanished. I backed away from the car, my heart racing. Something wasn't right. I needed to get out of there, now. I turned to head back to my truck, but as I did, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A figure, standing just beyond the car, barely visible through the fog. It was the man from before. He was standing there, motionless, his face hidden in the shadows, his back turned to me. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at him, my mind racing. How the hell had he gotten here? There was no way he could have walked from where I'd seen him earlier. It didn't make sense. "Hey," I called out, my voice shaking slightly. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" He didn't respond. He didn't move. My skin crawled with an overwhelming sense of dread as I took a step back. Something was very, very wrong here. And then, slowly, the man began to turn. As he did, the fog seemed to swirl around him, distorting his figure. For a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of his face, pale, expressionless, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through me. I ran. I didn't stop to think, didn't look back. I sprinted to my truck, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I threw myself into the cab, slammed the door, and floored the accelerator. The truck roared to life, tires screeching as I sped away from the scene. I drove for what felt like hours, my hands shaking on the wheel, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The fog was relentless, clinging to the road like a living thing, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from that place, from whatever the hell that thing was. Eventually, the fog began to lift, and the first faint light of dawn appeared on the horizon. I didn't stop until I reached a small diner on the outskirts of a town. I pulled into the parking lot, shut off the engine, and sat there for a long time, trying to calm my racing heart. I never found out what happened that night. I don't know who or what that man was, or how he had appeared in the fog like that. All I know is that something was out there, something I can't explain. I still drive that route from time to time, but I avoid that stretch of highway whenever I can. And when I do have to drive it, I make sure I'm off the road before night falls, because I'm not sure what would happen if I ran into him again.